Nebraska and Colorado, one of the biggest games of the college football season this year, and it's headlined by a battle of two head coaches, Deion Sanders and Matt Rhule. So in today's video, we're going to look at an extra early preview of one of the best games this fall. And today I'm joined by a special guest, Julian Wolf, Colorado expert, and we're going to really dive into the game, of course, one of the biggest games of the year, and talk about the keys to the game for both squads and our predictions. So, Julian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Excited to get into this matchup, and thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. So, yeah, let's just start off with Colorado. Obviously, you guys got the victory against Nebraska last year, 36-14 in dominating fashion. What have you guys done differently over the offseason? What are some big storylines around your program?
I think overall after that game, that was the high point of our season. 2-0. We beat CSC the next week. That was a high point. But then throughout the season, we kind of realized we were lacking depth in the trenches, defensive line, offensive line. We saw in the last game, Colorado. Shedeur was the most sacked quarterback in the country. We were one of the worst teams in the country at stopping the run. So this offseason, the big emphasis was bringing in more guys to protect Shedeur and guys that could stop the run. I think some of the biggest, we revamped our entire offensive line. We're going to have 4 completely new players there. A couple guys I want to highlight real quick. Jordan Seaton, the #1 offensive lineman in the country. I know Nebraska fans are hyped about Dylan Raiola, the #1 quarterback. Seaton's he's our Dylan Raiola for the offensive line. We brought in Khalil Benson, who's a starter at Indiana. Justin Myers, who was a starter at UTEP. All conference caliber players there. We Tyler Brown, he's going to be left guard for us this season. He was our best offensive lineman last year, but he wasn't able to play because of some transfer ineligibility. So now we fully get him this year. He was an FCS All-American. He was he was first team All Conference at Jackson State. He's a guy I'm really looking forward to. So on the offensive side, the line completely revamped to protect Shedeur, and I think that's going to be on full display against Nebraska in week 2.
Yeah, we saw Colorado. They brought in a lot of transfers. I believe most in the country with 42. And it's just interesting seeing what the two different programs do completely opposite. Of course, Matt Rhule is very old school, does not bring in too many transfers, likes to get players through high school recruiting. And then Deion, I mean, he is full guns blazing on the portal, bringing guys in, kicking guys out. And yeah, I mean, you guys brought in a lot of talented players on that O-line that specifically needed a lot of talent. So talking about Nebraska, quick recap on our offseason. So yeah, we only got a couple transfers through the portal. Jamal Banks, wide receiver from Wake Forest, one of the better wide receivers last year in the ACC. He's going to be our primary wideout. And then Stephon Thompson on the defense side of the football at that linebacker spot, coming in from Syracuse, another player who's been very successful throughout college. He's going to be likely our starter there. So again, we didn't bring in too many transfers. Micah Mazuka, a guy who started at Florida and Baylor in the past. But it should be noted that Nebraska returns almost everybody on this offense. Of course, Dylan Raiola, a couple key additions with some true freshmen there. But yeah, I mean, most of the team is returning for Nebraska, and another year under Matt Rhule. Hopefully, they can take a big jump, and they're expecting to. So that's really been the storyline this offseason. Of course, Dylan Raiola, #1 quarterback in the country. And really looking at that defense, that's something that Nebraska fans expect to be a top 20 unit, maybe even top 10. And the defensive line is going to be one of the best in the country. So that's definitely something they're hoping can take a big jump as well. Now, before we get any further, I want to ask you a question. I know a lot of Nebraska fans are interested in this. Colorado, specifically the fan base, has gained a lot of traction over the last year since Deion Sanders got there. A lot of, let's just call it what it is, some bandwagon fans. I mean, how do you feel about that? Obviously, you're a guy who's been a Colorado fan forever. So how do you feel about just a lot of the hype around the program?
It's definitely a very unique situation. I don't think there's been a time where there's this many fans loyal to a coach in particular. I can say growing up in Boulder, and I work on Pearl Street right by the facility, and fans would come in and they would come from Georgia, Florida, never have followed Colorado football in their life, and they would just be going for Deion. And I think you kind of have no choice but to embrace it. It's a cool thing. They're very positive. In terms of just the fan environment, being able to show people Boulder that have never even experienced anything like the mountains, it's been a really cool thing that I personally really like. It's the change it's brought to Boulder. It's definitely a different atmosphere, but I think we've done a good job of like still preserving our traditions, but having a new fan base. I think the only issue is kind of the coverage of it. I know there's a lot more people making videos about, Colorado football now and, in a positive light, which sometimes I think you could argue would go too far one way. But in terms of just the fans and the electric, being next to fans when they get to see Ralphie run out for the first time is such a cool thing to be around. So, I don't have any issue with it with the Bandwagon Fans.
And one more thing I want to ask you again, Deion Sanders, one of the most liked head coaches in college football, but with that, there's also some blowback. One of the most hated coaches in college football as well. And on social media, you see these rumors, fake or not fake. So, what has been your take on all these rumors in regards to the transfer portal and his sons, and are they true? What is true, and just overall your opinion on that?
I think the whole transfer portal situation, he comes in, Colorado was 1-11, and we were terrible that year. The record doesn't even reflect how bad. It wasn't like a Nebraska losing season where there's so many close losses. Our average loss that season was by over 32 points. It was miserable. There was not a lot of hope. So I think the emphasis then, especially when he's bringing in his sons who only have a year or two of eligibility, the emphasis was to win now, and he needed to do that through the transfer portal. With that being said, that required a lot of players to be cut and a lot of players to be forced out. There's no good way to do that. Any player that's in that situation that's leaving is going to have hard feelings about it. That's just the reality of the situation. I don't care if it's Nick Saban coming to Colorado. Every single player that would be forced to leave is not going to be happy in one way or another. I think most of the players kind of understood that, and it was a transactional thing, and college football is a business, and it's just the reality of the situation. Some players were more upset than others. I think Deion, you definitely see on YouTube, a big emphasis is, the media having, his one of his oldest sons vlogs the teams, having kind of cameras around that. A lot of the players love that, but when you're on the other side of that and you're the one that's trying to be kicked out, it's going to leave people in a negative light. And in terms of the false rumors being spread, all it takes is one or two players to report that. And Deion and Coach Prime, he's such a hot name that anytime someone reports about that story, it's just gets blown completely out of proportion. And it's you see it. Someone will come out with a rumor, and then like the Lil Wayne situation where a player said, hey, he was telling people that if they didn't show up to the concert, they would be cut. Just completely false. But then that's a headline. Now people can repost that, and it goes viral. So I think they did a really good job of, at first, when people were attacking Deion and Shedeur stepped in, Deion was clapping back at people on Twitter and was kind of one of the low points of the offseason for Colorado. They reflected on that. They picked Camden Dempsey, who's a walk-on long snapper for the program. He's been around since 2021, and he's one of the original Buffs that stayed over. They have him. They designated him as the governor, so now he's in charge of responding to the media, and everything goes through him. And I think that's a really cool thing they did to kind of just let the media be the media. It can be tempting, especially for college kids, to step in, but I think they've done a good job of fixing that issue.
Yeah, I wanted to hear your perspective on that, but let's get to last year's game. So, again, a lot of hype around that. Of course, Deion's home opener coming off of a victory against TCU. Nebraska was originally the favorite, then coming off of a loss against Minnesota. Of course, Colorado won on national television against TCU. That line flipped. I believe at game time, Colorado was a 3-4 point favorite. And yeah, they took care of business, won 36-14. In the game that Colorado, the box score, in my opinion, looks a lot more slanted in their favor, but it was a closer game than a lot of people give them credit for. It was 13-0 at halftime. Nebraska made it 13-7. And then as the game went on, Nebraska got tired. The Colorado offense wore them out, and really Shedeur Sanders had one of those best games of the season. That's why they won. But yeah, what was your take there on that game last year? What did you see? And what can you see potentially this year when they play again?
I was there live. Yeah, I definitely agree. It was that first half was very close. Kind of some of the stuff I took away is that Nebraska's defense really kept them in it in that first half. Over the game they sacked Shedeur 8 times. It was they were stopping the run. CU only averaged 1.8 yards a carry in this game. It was very bad, and we really were just making the only reason we were scoring in that first half is kind of because of the turnovers, and the turnovers weren't necessarily forced. They were more Jeff Sims just dropping the football. I'm sure you probably were frustrated with that. But I think it's I've seen a lot of Nebraska fans say, hey, fix those turnovers. This game's completely different, which I'm not disagreeing with. But I think if you look down to, Jeff Sims scores that long rushing touchdown in the third quarter to cut the lead to 6. The next 4 possessions for Colorado, they had a 10-play, 75-yard touchdown. They had an 8-play, 55 yards, finished with a 30-yard field goal. The next possession, 9 plays, 65-yard touchdown. Next possession, 6 plays, 55-yard touchdown. They were consistently in that second half going down and scoring and picking this defense apart. And I really liked what I saw at the end of the game. You could argue that Nebraska's defense was tired, and even though time of possession was about even, Nebraska is a team that should dominate time of possession, especially in this matchup. So I think a lot of what CU, even though the turnover differential won't be the same, I highly doubt it will be the same. I think you could argue that Nebraska's passing attack, they're going to have more than 119 passing yards and 70 receiving yards by wide receivers. But, Colorado is going to fix some things too. I think, their offensive line, they're not going to allow 8 sacks again. They're going to average more than 1.8 yards a carry. Their receivers, Shedeur had an incredible game with no time to throw. He could have been sacked double-digit times. But, I think our receivers got better. We brought back the majority of our guys. The only guy we lost was Xavier Weaver, who had 170 yards in this game. But another guy we brought in was Will Shepard. He made third-team All-SEC from Vanderbilt. And then we also brought in LeJontay Wester from FAU, he was first-team All-Conference there. He's 5th in the nation all time, or 5th in the nation currently in receiving yards. And, we have a legitimate top 10 receiver core in the country this year. And I'm really excited. And I think, defensively, Nebraska was able to run the ball in the first half. And I know they went away from that when they were starting to trail, but CU's defensive line and their linebacker core got a lot better. And I think overall across this defense, we improved. And, I think we're kind of on pace to keep up with the improvements Nebraska made.
Yeah, I think looking back on this game, it was really Nebraska's offensive ineptitude really showed. Of course, Jeff Sims was not the guy. We later found that out. He never started again after that Colorado game. The running attack, again, we try to get that going. We barely averaged 3.5 yards a carry. And then really, yeah, we were gassed on defense. We did a good job in that first half, but the defense was constantly getting burnt out by that great wide receiver core at Colorado. And then inevitably, Shedeur Sanders started to get going. And once that happened, it was over for Nebraska. So, yeah, that hopefully for Husker fans, they can change that and the defense does not have to stay on the field as much. Of course, Nebraska, they want to run that ball down your throat. They want to control time of possession, and hopefully they can get to Shedeur Sanders more. But, yeah, the main thing for me looking at that game was Nebraska's 4 turnovers. And you just shot yourself in the foot time and time again. But truly, I don't know if Nebraska could have won that game if they didn't turn the ball over just because of how bad Jeff Sims was. But, the thing that's going to be completely different when Colorado fans watch Nebraska is they're going from the worst Power 5 quarterback last year from Jeff Sims to a true freshman 5-star who still might have struggles, but he's going to be leaps and bounds better. So that was last year's game. But let's set the framework for this year's game. Of course, Memorial Stadium this year at Nebraska, Matt Rhule versus Deion Sanders, longtime rivalry. And this is something that's honestly gotten bigger and bigger as the offseason has gone on. We've seen the chatter between Nebraska and Colorado fans. And even after the game last year, Shedeur Sanders said that Matt Rhule disrespected him, and that, of course, got some blowback from the Nebraska's fan base and the Colorado fan base. So again, there's almost a sold-out crowd. I believe it is a sold-out crowd, $300 a ticket. And I know a lot of Nebraska fans have been saying this is going to be the loudest we've heard of Memorial Stadium in years. And it's been loud, but this is going to be a different level. I mean, there's a different level when a rival comes to town, a lot of hatred in the stands. They want to really bring it to Deion and bring it to Colorado. And really, I believe this is going to be one of the biggest games of Matt Rhule and Deion Sanders' career. It's a prove-it game, right? Both of them are polar opposite coaches. We have Matt Rhule, old school, completely old school, likes to do things the traditional way. And Deion is largely a new school head coach. He likes to use the transfer portal. He revamps his team extensively every single offseason. So they're completely different in terms of philosophy. For that reason, they want to win this game even more. So, yeah, it's going to be an incredible game. And I think the night atmosphere is going to give Nebraska a little bit of a leg up, just like the Colorado fans gave Colorado a leg up. So before, again, I don't want you to give your keys to the game just yet, but yeah, set the framework for this game and, what you're excited about.
First of all, I'm really excited to go to this game. I plan on being there. I've watched a lot of videos of the under the light stuff they've done, and clips from the Nebraska Oregon game when they 7 or 8 years ago. It looks like such a cool environment. Nebraska. I think it's going to be, none of our players have played in an atmosphere like this for the most part, and it's going to be a big step up. In Boulder, I think capacity is only around 50,000, 52,000. It's going to be a completely different animal. These players, though, I feel like they're ready for it. This game they've done a lot to prepare. They have Hall of Fame head coaches, to get the guys ready. They're not underestimating this environment whatsoever. And I think this Colorado team is very experienced. I know you could say the exact same thing about Nebraska, but the guys know what it takes this year in this game, and it's a big Nebraska. I think your first 7-game stretch before that Ohio State matchup, other than even if you lose to Colorado, you could very well be looking at 6-1. If Colorado can't get past Nebraska here, what does that say about, can we beat teams like Arizona? Can we beat teams like Utah? It's going to be a lot harder coming out of this game with a loss for Colorado, because they don't have the easiest schedule in the world. We play a lot of teams that will be ranked throughout the year. We end the season on a 6-game losing streak, so we need all the team. We end the game with we end the season with 6 teams that could very well beat us, and we're probably favored in the games. But I'm really excited. I think people forget that Colorado in 2018 went into Lincoln before and won that game. It hasn't been impossible to win there. I know that Huskers typically play better, but my only concern is we have a true freshman starting at left tackle, and pre-snap penalties were such an issue for us last season, and that could be something. The crowd noise gets to him. Shedeur gets sacked a couple times. If this game gets away from Colorado, it will be, that crowd will be a big reason for that.
Yeah, so let's start to talk about the game in depth with the keys to the game. So I'm going to go first, just my take on Nebraska and Colorado. So Phil Steele's magazine came out a couple weeks ago, and he noted that Nebraska was the second most improved team in college football. Now, I'm looking over that. I'm not sure if I agree necessarily, but I definitely do think we're top 10. Of course, the clear upgrade, the quarterback spot, upgrade at every single offensive spot. I think we do have a downgrade at linebacker, maybe even in the secondary, but this offense is going to go from one of the worst in Power 5 football or one of the better. So that's really what I'm looking at. I think Colorado, they're going to be shocked when they see how improved Nebraska is on that side of the football. But, talking about Colorado, I think there's some question marks early in the season. I thought this was a big question mark last year. I was proved to be incorrect, but I'm going to be interested to see if it reigns true this year. And it's the fact that they have 42 new transfers coming in. They have 41 coming out. It's going to be interesting to see if they gel together, if they're, know how to play together, know how to play and get used to the scheme. Now, again, that did not serve to be true last year. Obviously, they started off very hot and then declined as the year went on. But maybe that happens again this year. But talking about Nebraska's key to the games, how can Nebraska beat Colorado? So right now we're about a touchdown favorite. I imagine that line will go down by the time we actually play. I think Nebraska by 4 or 5 or where it'll end. But the number one key to the game for Nebraska is the secondary needs to step up. Colorado, they're not trying to hide what they want to do offensively. They want to throw the football, Shedeur Sanders and their stacked receiver room. And because of that, Nebraska's secondary, they got to have one of the better games of the season. And this is a secondary that is a question mark for Nebraska. You feel really good about the safeties, one of the better safety corps in the Big Ten, but the cornerback room has almost no depth. You return one of the best corners in the country, Tommy Hill, and besides that, you have nobody. So the cornerback room is a huge question mark going into fall camp, and man, do they need to play well, because, a lot of people like to talk about Travis Hunter, but they have a bunch of other guys there in that wide receiver room. Another, key to the game is getting to the quarterback. This D-line is the real deal for Nebraska. Go out there and prove it against a Colorado offensive line that's also very improved. But I truly believe that this D-line for Nebraska has the capability of being top 10, even top 5 in college football, and they should win that matchup. Now, one thing that when I watched last year's game, Colorado made Nebraska play their game, meaning, they controlled the tempo of offense. They controlled the tempo on defense. Nebraska can't do that this year. They need to have Colorado play their brand of football, which means running the ball down their throat, controlling time of possession, have slower drives, and play that field position game. And I think, Matt Rhule can definitely succeed if that happens. Now, the last key to the game for Nebraska, before we get to yours for Colorado, is make it a defensive battle. If this game is a shootout, I do not believe Nebraska can win. But if Nebraska can hold Colorado to, let's say, 20, less than 20 points, even, 25 points, I think Nebraska will win this game single-handedly. But if Colorado and their offense can break through and start scoring touchdowns in a flurry, it's going to be hard for Nebraska to keep up, because we know how electric that passing attack can get. We saw it firsthand last year. So really try to make Colorado run the football, try to shut down their passing threat because their running back game, as you know, I mean, it got worse last year. They lost a lot of their key backs, including Dylan Edwards, who's now over to Kansas State. So hopefully they can do that on offense, but really need the defense to step up for the Huskers, and the offense is going to be wildly improved, and hopefully they'll do a good job. So let's get to your keys to the game, and then, of course, we're going to have our predictions.
Yeah, so there a lot of key things have to go right for CU this year. Firstly, I want to touch upon kind of something you brought up, with the 40 transfers, coming in, 40 transfers leaving. How will they look this year? I think on paper and looking from the outside in, it seems like wow, they're turning over the whole program again. CU is ranked number 15 in the country in returning production. A lot of the guys that were leaving were players that were on the bench. I think you could really argue 2 or 3 guys I don't think would start. Dylan Edwards is, the top of that. I don't think he was going to start this season, but, definitely a valuable piece, or another running back in that same position, and another cornerback that we lost that I think would have been a good depth piece. But a lot of the guys that were leaving weren't going to be big contributors for this team, and we were able to replace them with we had the number 1 transfer portal class in the country. So I think that's something you feel really good about in the country, or you just feel really good about overall. My biggest, the biggest question mark for CU by far is how does this offensive line look against Nebraska? That Phil Steele magazine, he has Nebraska's defensive line ranked 5th. I think that's a little high, but they proved it last year. They were one of the best teams against the run, one of the best teams at getting to the quarterback. Colorado proved they were able to win while still allowing 8 sacks. But, if you can protect Shedeur, and I don't really like the secondary for Nebraska. So I think, C's going to have the advantage there. So, you give Shedeur more time than last year where he had 393 passing yards. That's going to be huge, and, could lead to a massive game for Colorado's offense. The second key thing is just not allowing Nebraska to run the ball and establish a run game. Nebraska, you mentioned all the points before. They're going to they have to dominate time of possession. They're going to have to give their defense time to rest and kind of wear Colorado down. And it was working the first half. I mean, last year overall in the game, they averaged 5.3 yards a carry, but this Colorado defensive line is probably the most improved unit on this team. I think now is a chance to prove it. And so, yeah, stop not allowing Nebraska to run the football is a big key. The third thing is being disciplined, no pre-snap penalties. This is what I'm scared of. We were one of the worst teams in the country in false starts. And I think even though last year Nebraska did have more penalties in the game than Colorado did have more penalties than Nebraska in last year's game, I think Colorado, that home field advantage, it will definitely make a difference. And the fourth reason is, I think Colorado's going to have to win the turnover battle. Dylan Raiola, I think he's very talented. I watched him in high school while he was committed to Georgia because my roommate went to Buford, so I watched a lot of Dylan Raiola football. I think he has all the talent in the world, but a true freshman in a game this big it's not an easy task. And this Colorado secondary is one. I love this secondary for Colorado. I think we're going to be able to get pressure on Raiola, and if we have to get an interception or two, maybe force fumbles. We were really good at that last year, and on the offensive side, we had a perfect game. We didn't have a single turnover, or in garbage time we ended up having a fumble. But if we can win the turnover battle probably by a margin of 2 or 3, that could be the difference. And then lastly, I think just special teams is going to have to. It might be the swing in this game. I really like Colorado's special teams this year. I know Nebraska, their kicker. I'm sure Nebraska fans have we might not be the most popular guy. Struggled a little bit in the spring game, but and the punter, he was terrible against Colorado last season. So I think special teams, in a game that could be this tight, could make or break it. So Colorado is going to have to win that matchup.
Yeah, that's good you mentioned special teams. I almost forgot that. Of course, Tristan Alvano, our kicker for Nebraska, was awful against Colorado last year, was bad pretty much throughout the season. We brought in a couple other kickers to battle him throughout fall camp, but that's definitely something Nebraska needs to be a positive throughout this game. If you have a good opportunity at a field goal, you need to hit it because every point matters. All right, let's get to our predictions. Nebraska versus Colorado, week 2. I'm going to start off with you, Julian. What's your take?
I got, after a lot of consideration, and first of all, I want to say I thought Nebraska was going to win last year. I was coming off the high of the TCU game, but I was really worried that Nebraska was going to establish the run game, get to Shedeur, and they did those things for a little, but then Colorado was able to overcome that. My prediction for this game is a 30-21 Colorado win. I think it's going to be close. I think there's that it's going to be a similar game to last year where the first half both teams are figuring it out. Dylan Raiola, this is his first true test. I think Colorado is going to show him a lot of the things he's never seen in his life and really kind of fluster him. And on the CU's offensive side, I think Nebraska is going to get a couple early sacks potentially and kind of keep it in it. But I really think it'll over the course of the game, similar to last year. Colorado, Shedeur is going to have more time to throw. The Colorado receivers are going to get open over the course of this game. It's kind of inevitable that they will be able to win their matchups. And I think I don't see Colorado being able to run the football. So Nebraska's going to stay in that way. But I think Colorado wins just by over a score. But that's my prediction. I could see a world. I think if Nebraska wins this, it's definitely a situation where Shedeur gets sacked 6 or more times, and Nebraska is able to run it 5 yards a carry or if not more, and kind of the crowd gets to Colorado and they just kind of throw away the game at the end. But my prediction is a 30-21 Colorado win.
Yeah, this is a game where if it was being played at Colorado in a night atmosphere, I'd feel a lot worse for Nebraska. I'd probably have Colorado winning, but Nebraska really plays well under the lights in Memorial. I remember, and this is the most hyped up game probably since Michigan in 2021, and Michigan came into that game undefeated. Obviously, they later went on to go to the playoff that year. So this is a very hyped up game, and we play very well under the lights. So for that reason, I think Nebraska is going to win 24-20. I think it's going to be a close game. I think too many Nebraska fans think it's going to be maybe even too much in the favor of the Huskers. But listen, this Colorado passing attack is legit, and I think it is going to scorch Nebraska a little bit, especially in that first half. But when this defense starts to settle down, I think this D-line is going to have a really good game. I think this is a prove-it game for the D-line. I mean, there's so many great players who are have NFL potentials, and they're going to get to Shedeur a couple times. And talking about Dylan Raiola a little bit, this is a big prove-it game, and I could see him struggle. I could see him throw a couple picks. This is the first real opponent he's ever played, but this is one of those breakthrough, legendary type performances that only some top-tier quarterbacks can have, and I think Dylan Raiola, while he might struggle, he's going to do just enough, and he's going to show off that arm strength. I think Nebraska's running attack is also going to be wildly improved. Nebraska is going to dominate time of possession. I think that's something that Colorado, again, that's a big key to the game, like you mentioned, for Colorado to stop that. Nebraska is finally going to figure it out. And for that reason, I think they just barely get 24-20. Colorado will cover. I could definitely see a world where Colorado wins. Nebraska's secondary, again, is the number one concern in this ballgame. If Nebraska cannot figure out their position at cornerback, it's going to be tough sledding for Nebraska, but I think they will. And I think this offense is going to be, again, completely different than what it was. And Colorado fans might not be used to that, or the team might not used to be that. And Nebraska is likely going to start 2-0, and Colorado will drop to 1-1. So that's our predictions there. Big game, Nebraska versus Colorado. Definitely excited. I know both of us are going to be there. I'm just excited about the atmosphere. I mean, that's what college sports is all about, and it's going to be rowdy. There's going to be a lot of trash talk, and I'm excited for it. So, Julian, thanks for joining the show here today here on the Wilsonman Sports Channel. Again, talking Nebraska versus Colorado. And we will be back in about 2 months when the game gets closer and have another pregame show for that. So watch out. But guys, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. If you made it this far in the video, hey, let us know your predictions about the game. You got Nebraska winning. Do you think Colorado pulls the upset? Let us know. And as always, folks, go Big Red. I'll say go Deion and Matt Rhule this time, and see ya.